Right then, guys, so basically this is my third and final video on fate, and you can't finish on fate essentially without having had at least some brief discussion even about how to alter fate or how to avoid fate, because we all try to do it in many ways. We all try to predict our futures and make them as better as possible as we can, as good as possible as we possibly can. Yeah, sorry, I'm losing my voice. I've been doing a lot of videos. So basically, we all want the very best we can for our futures. And ultimately, even whether our fates have it or not, we will always tend to endeavour to better ourselves as we go throughout life. Now, we as individuals with sheer willpower are capable, as a result, of altering our fate minor amounts here and there. Because as individuals, we are quite small, we're quite insignificant, we're not going to change the flow of fate significantly, and so it's kind of allowed to happen. It's not kept in check too much by the norns. Now, if we're reverberating a little bit too much and causing too much of a stoppage of flow of fate through one of the realms, i.e. the realm of Midgard in this case, then the norns may do something about it and move you back towards where you're supposed to be if you've moved too far away from your fate, for example. But there are people who actively try to get as far away from their fate as possible and as close to a fate, a more desirable fate, for example, that they particularly want. Now, the first thing to do is, of course, be able to try and predict your fate. This is something very hard to do. No one can really predict their fate. The only person who could predict fate was Odin, and of course the Norns themselves. Okay, Odin was able to predict fate because he sacrificed his right eye for a drink out of the well of Erd. And in return for that, he received the power of foresight. Now, Seder magic does give some power of foresight to some degree, but it's not necessarily guaranteed to give you, allow you to see so far in the future that you can see your death. Especially a god. A god lives a very, very long time. Okay, and so how can he see millions of thousands, if not millions of years in the future, perfectly, seeing every single event that's about to happen? How can he do that and then use his magic and use his willpower and use his influence to try and change that? It'd be like playing the most complicated game of chess you could possibly imagine. You've got to see a billion moves ahead, because if you put that there, okay, what happens now? Eventually, a billion moves time, something's going to happen down the road. Okay, he needed to predict everything. Odin had a vast mind and a vast intellect, and that's one of the reasons why I respect him so much, because he really did understand these things. However, I think he also understood that he couldn't escape his own fate. I think he knew it was a futility, that the Norns would never allow him to live. But he's a Viking, and he was going to go down fighting, doing the very best he can to mess things up as best as possible. And that's why, again, another reason why I love Odin. He's stubborn. He knew he was going to die during Ragnarok, and he knew there's nothing he could do about it. You can't change such a major event such as that. A death of the king of the gods during apocalypse. No, that's gonna always happen. No matter how much that god tries to change it, no matter what magics he tries to learn to change it, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to happen. However, minor changes or smaller changes or bigger changes to smaller people are more possible. And so the practitioner of Seder magic, Seidr magic, was practiced by both humans and God alike. Okay, so Vikings did actually practice this magic. They also practiced rune magic, which was described mostly as rune sight. You could see the runes. And they also practiced shamanism. Okay, which is sometimes described as animism, but I think there's a false description. I think it should be called shamanism, if I remember correctly. But anyway, there was a variety of different magics that the ancient Nordic people did practice and practiced as part of their faith. They weren't seen as witches or heretics or anything along those lines. They were, to some degree, accepted within society. The only ones who weren't accepted amongst society were those who practiced Seder magic. You'd be ostracised from society, and typically it was seen seen as something that only females were allowed to, should practice. If a female practiced sadomagic, they tend to be left alone. They were sort of on the out fringes of society, maybe not fully respected, maybe not trusted, but they were not cast out of society. But if a man practiced sadomagic, he would be seen as being feminine. He would be either cast out of his tribe or clan or whatever, your family, whatever unit you want to sort of describe it as, or he would sorry, my dog wants to play fetch for me. Or he would be kind of still accepted in society, but he'd be shunned. No man would have anything to do with him. So practice of sadomagic was, as I say, restricted typically to females. However, it is the most powerful magic when it comes to the influence and changing of fate. Okay, it's like essentially nudging fate just ever so slightly towards a more positive result. You're not trying to change fate significantly, because it's not going to happen. The norms are going to keep you in check, and it's going to cause too many reverberations, and you can't predict what problems you're going to cause. When you change something in the future that's going to happen to something more positive, you could change something in the past to be more negative. Okay, and so small changes tend to have less reverberation. They tend to cause less problems. Okay, now the person who introduced sadomagic was Freya. Okay, of the Vallenheim. She was the most potent and practiced user of sadomagic amongst the amongst anyone within the 9 realms. Second to her was Odin himself, which is unusual because, of course, Odin being male shouldn't have practiced sadomagic, but Odin wasn't exactly one for the rules. He didn't care. He used sadomagic because, well, why not? He wants to change fate. He's going to try it. Who's going to say no to him? It was his approach, essentially. But he wasn't in the same level as Freya. Freya was a very, very, very potent practitioner of sadomagic, and there is a story about how she used to take her magic to men and would show them their future and stuff like that, which is a story which I will tell at one point, and it's very interesting. But because I think basically all the men, she kills them, I think, if I remember correctly, because they don't like to hear the fact that they're going to die a certain way and all the rest of it. So there's a twist to the tale anyway, if I remember correctly. It's not one I've read very often, but it's a very interesting story, and it shows you how Freya interacts with the mortal realms, i.e. Midgard. Sadomagic was practiced by humans, as I say, but it regards the practice of it, regards the rituals, I know nothing. I don't know it at all in any way whatsoever. I know obviously a little bit about runes, in the sense that I can read runes to some extent. I have them on my hand, for example, and I use them for magical purposes. In the essence, I use them for protection and for guidance. I hope that brings upon me the gaze of the gods in a way that kind of gives me the life that I hope to get. But at the same time, I'm not counting on them to give me the life. I'm working towards getting the life that I want to get. It's nice to have something that gives you a bit more confidence that life's not going to mess you around. That's all. So I do, even someone like myself, I do use rune magic to some degree, and I use it through the tattoos. Hang on 1 second, let's just get rid of him. Big throat, there we go. So even I myself do use rune magic, but beyond that, there's very little that you can do to change your fate. And as I said, it's the reason why is, unfortunately, I'm holding the camera. Let's see if I can hold the camera with my knees. Let's see, there we go. I'm holding my camera with my knees. How cool is that? Fate interlocks. Okay, every time you meet someone, fate crosses with that person. Your fate crosses with that person's fate. You become interlinked forever, ultimately. When you meet someone else, they interlock with you again, and then they interlock with you again. And when these people meet someone else, they interlock with them. But indirectly, they also interlock with you. And so the problem with fate is that it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. The longer you've been around. And so it gets harder to change fate the older you become in many respects, i.e., and it kind of makes sense. To cheat death when you're older is harder to cheat death when you're younger, right? Because the older you are, the higher chances you're going to die. But fate has a way of making sure that happens. Now, imagine yourself as a god. Odin, how old was he when he started practicing Seder to try and prevent Ragnarok or prevent certain acts within Ragnarok? He would have been very old, and when Ragnarok eventually comes, he'll be even older. It's a hard one. It's a very hard one. His fate, and because he's such an important person as well, it's not even if he acted as a hermit for all his life, never interacted with anyone. His life is so profound, has such an influence on not just men and women within Midgard. His impacts also on the gods themselves, and so his weave, so to speak, of fate is going to be so thick. It's going to take some powerful magic to do anything with it, anything at all. I mean, think of this. If he found out about Ragnarok right at the beginning, just after creating Midgard itself, killing Ymir with Odin and with Vili and Ve, his two brothers, he became a hermit. He still has created the race of men. Men and women exist because of him, and so his death is still going to influence us to some degree or another. He's influenced the world in such a powerful way and created Midgard. He created an entire realm, for God's sake, that there was no turning back for him. From that point on, at least, anyway, there was no turning back for him. And when Ragnarok comes, I believe, there's no way to escape Fenrir for Odin. If I'm one of the ones to fight for Odin in Valhalla against Freya, trust me, it'd be an honor. I'll have no problem fighting, and if need to be, dying to protect him. Even if it is a lost cause, it doesn't matter. It's better to go down fighting than anything else, right? But you can see my worry in some ways why Odin is essentially acting in a futile manner, but it's respectable at the same time, because, well, there's nothing like being stubborn. Being stubborn is a quality Odin is well known for. Anyway, guys, this is the final part that I will be filming on Fate. I hope it's educated you. I hope you found it entertaining. Comments, anything like that, please feel free to put in my comment section. If I've said something which it needs clarification, ask. If I've offended you, tell me, so I learn not to repeat certain things again. I can't see how I could have offended you, but just teach me and I'll teach you, and let's do this. Nice one, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.